introductions out of the way, so you won't miss too much. So welcome to tonight's session. This is our last but one session of the programme. Thanks very much to those of you that have continued to keep coming back throughout the year to rejoin us, and to anybody that hasn't been here before, welcome to the session. So I'm Lynette Brotherwood, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague Iona, who you can see on the screen there. If I could just ask everyone else if you could keep your microphone and your camera turned off at the moment. We will probably have an opportunity at the end of the session to invite you to come in and chat if you'd like, or to make some comments. So we'll hopefully have some interaction later on in the session today. So just a quick reminder, if you've been to these sessions before, you probably will be aware that we use PowerPoint Live, and so that allows you the opportunity to flick back through the slides if you've missed something without it impacting on anybody else's viewing. You can also click on the three little dots to enter full screen mode, and you can turn on live captions if you find that useful. We would ask that for most of the session this afternoon that you use the chat function to communicate with us, but there will be times where we will give you the opportunity just to use the hands up and to come in and speak. I don't think we will have large numbers this afternoon, so that shouldn't be a problem. So just a reminder of the other way you can communicate with us, and these questions don't disappear. So there's some there from our very first session. If you've got something that's a bit longer and that you would like us to deal with in our final session, where there will be some more opportunities for interaction, then please just use the link and post it into our car park Padlet. And as it says there on the screen, there's no such thing as a silly question. Every question is a learning experience, not only for the person who is asking the question, but for all the others who probably wanted to ask the question, but weren't sure whether they were prepared to put it up there or not. There is also a second Padlet, which I think Iona's just put in the chat. Yep, which takes you to all the links that we've provided so far throughout the programme. It has the slides from the previous sessions, it has the recordings of the previous sessions, and it has links to various documents and websites which we've discussed as we've gone through. Okay, so the aims of this afternoon's session is, as you can see on the screen, to provide some support with getting started in teaching numeracy and mathematics outdoors. And we know that for secondary teachers, this can sometimes provide a bit of a challenge. So we've got some ideas there for you. We've got some practical examples of using the outdoors successfully to teach numeracy and maths. And we're also going to look at another way to take mathematics out of the maths classroom by looking at working with colleagues from across disciplines to develop numeracy across learning. Okay. And I think I'm handing on to you at this point, Iona.
Thanks, Lynette. So there was just one or two other folk coming in, so I think we've managed to sort that. And I'm just going to change my windows around so that I can sort of stay looking at my camera as well, because it's going to be a bit weird. I'm on two screens, so you can see the side of my face half the time. So apologies about that. So yes, so the first part of today's session is going to be looking at taking mathematics outdoors. And there's some previously published guidance there that you might find useful. You know, taking maths outdoors, if we can do it, it really is beneficial, because these outdoor learning experiences are often some of the most memorable ones for children and young people, and they can give learners a chance to be enjoyable and creative and challenging, a bit more adventurous, and really help children and young people sort of learn from the experience of growing confident in their and responsible in their learning environment. And they can maybe help them to appreciate the landscape that they're in as well. And where possible, although it's not often as easy in urban environments, is to be able to appreciate their natural heritage as well. Learning outdoors definitely does offer many opportunities to deepen and contextualise their understanding within curriculum areas, and to help them link learning across the curriculum in different contexts at all levels as well. So today we're going to focus on taking numeracy and maths outdoors and the benefits this can have, but these resources are available, the ones that you can see on the screen are available as publications that might help you, if you're interested in reading a little bit more about this. These were both published quite far apart. So the first one, the Curriculum for Excellence Through Outdoor Learning, that was published in 2010. And the second one is actually just from February this year. This was looking at successful approaches to learning and teaching outdoors, and that's from the HMIE that produced that one. But basically, they both highlight the importance of providing outdoor learning experiences for learners. And even although the first document is 12 years old, the messages that are in there are still really valid. It's easy to follow, and if you'd like to begin to introduce learning outdoors, then that's probably the best place to start. The second one is a thematic review of looking at outdoor learning in schools and seeing what's working well, and where there's areas for improvement. So although we're focusing on taking maths outdoors, it's useful to see the sort of wider context, and we've got lots of links at the end that will help you see how your maths outdoors sort of links to other areas of the curriculum as well. So we've got a wee starter activity for you to do, and we're just going to use the chat for this one. And this is really, I'm just trying to get you to think off the top of your head any 2 or 3 areas of numeracy and maths that you teach with your learners. Of what do you think are maybe the ones that are most naturally easy to take out of the classroom and teach in an outdoor setting? And if you have done any of that or thought about any of that, what are some of the benefits that you feel there are to taking numeracy and maths outside? So just give you a minute or two just to pop in a couple of areas that you think would be easy to take outside. And if you've got any thoughts about any benefits or maybe even any challenges, that's something that you could pop in the chat as well. We've got a couple of people saying measurement, speed, distance, and time.
Yep.
Probability and shape.
Probability. Scale factor, trigonometry.
Catherine's saying there, volume of raised beds, for example, that thinking about how many bags of compost it would take to fill a raised bed, those kind of activities. If you've got a community garden or a school garden that you've got access to, that's a brilliant opportunity. So loads of stuff around numeracy, maths, and their applications in there as well. So yeah, quite a lot there. I'm hoping that we'll be able to over the period of the first part of that today, we'll give you some more ideas about a variety of different things that we can do. Human graphs outdoors in college for straight line graphs. Oh, Pam, if you can get a Cartesian grid painted on your playground, there are so many things you can do with that. So have a rope to join them up and have the people as the points. Absolutely. You can do that.
Yep.
Just with coordinates, straight line, quadratics, polynomials, right the way up. We could be doing that. We can always be making it an Argand diagram and have got a bit complex number stuff going on. The locus of points for an interpretation of a locus in a complex plane. You could be doing that with your advanced higher, so we could still be doing it then. So lots of things that we could do. And absolutely making use of natural resources. If we do have natural resources around and about in our environment, we've got lots of opportunities there as well. So Nanette, I just want to click on to the next slide. We'll have a look at some of the sort of generic.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Iona, we've had lots of examples of things that we could do, but not so much of the benefits. So maybe that's something to come back to later on. Is just to think about. the benefits. Oh, there's and there's Pam come in there just to prove me wrong. Homework, yeah, good.
Yeah, there are certainly implications if you've got large groups of learners that managing large groups of learners outside it is something you've got to consider, and there's some practicalities around that as well, and a lot of it depends on the environment that you've got. If you are able to team up with a colleague doing that and just have another pair of hands, or if you've got a support for learning assistant with you at the time, or you've got another adult, or perhaps it might be an opportunity. I know things are starting to loosen a little bit more with having visitors into the school. There's opportunity to have maybe a countryside ranger involved. There's other partners with schools that you might be able to get in if you're doing a piece of extended work, and so there's lots of issues around it, but none of them is unsurmountable. I think that's what we're trying to. And the more children get used to learning outdoors, and if the expectations are clear about what you're expecting of them, that's similar to what the standards expect in the classroom, I think that's key. So just 10 top tips here. This is from a really nice blog, a Rob Bushby article from a couple of years ago. Just sort of top tips there, and just the blog discusses some of the benefits of learning outdoors. And even though we're not in the immediate post-pandemic anymore, with ideas around ventilation and the benefits of being outdoors, many of the benefits that we were being encouraged to take advantage of during the last couple of years are still in place, and we're coming into a nice time. Hopefully the remaining weeks of term will be nice weather-wise, and maybe you can get them out and about and doing some things outside. So if you're interested, that's a really nice blog, and it's worth having a read of. And it's 10 top tips are quite good about learning outdoors, and the key one being that it's for all ages in all areas of the curriculum, and that if you can share your ideas and your experiences, that's really helpful to sort of with colleagues and other practitioners, just to see what's worked well. And there's obviously lots of benefits to health and well-being about being out in the fresh air, out in the sun. I know we're all probably horribly vitamin D deficient. It's been a fairly long, dark winter, so getting out and about and getting in the sunshine if we can is a good thing. Just on to the next one. This was we do need to recognise that if you're in the primary compared to the secondary, it is a slightly different context. You've got a bit more flexibility in primary, potentially, with having the class all day and all these kind of things. So I just kind of put together some 10 top tips for, no, they're not 10, some top tips for working outside with secondary classes. It can be tricky to fit in an outdoor experience into a single period, and that pupil movement around the school just can cut down your time that's available. So choosing when to do it, when you should know where your learners are coming from and which are the periods where they pretty much arrive sharp. If you've got a longer period of time that you can make use of doing that, or maybe if you can do it after a break, that they can come meet you outside and they're not having to wander the school before they get to you. Our recent move to Teams or Google Classroom, now you've got lots of opportunity there to send out reminders to learners. So just to help avoid that, oh, miss, I forgot that it was outside today. You can always just put a reminder out on Teams the night before. Remember, tomorrow we are going to be learning outside. You've got to meet me at such and such time and such a place. To send the reminder out can be helpful, and a reminder the day before in class as well. Just make sure the meeting point's clear. Always leave a note on the door for the stragglers. There will always be at least one that forgot, possibly deliberately, so there's no excuses, and maybe have a handy neighbour colleague on the lookout for stragglers going, come on, you were told yesterday, you know where you're meeting, go and skedaddle down and meet your teacher. So just having a bit of prep in there and having a bit of backup from a colleague can be really helpful. Basically, the need for that level of preparation will reduce if you teach outside a bit more, and it just becomes a bit less of a novelty and a bit more something that's that's something you just do from time to time that the learners will get used to. It's really important you maintain the usual expectations around engagement and behaviour, and do have a way of contacting help just in case there are any major issues that you need to deal with, in the same way as if you were having to deal with that in the classroom, that you've got that support there. Sometimes there's walkie-talkies available, for example, and maybe let your certainly let your principal teacher know, or if there's a member of SLT that looks after your department, you can let them know that you're outside, and you just in case there's any issues. It's really helpful if you consider the potential for teamwork, and maybe putting two classes together that come to you, you know, consecutively. Can you work with a colleague? Is it able to be, you know, logistically that can be a bit tricky, but at certain times of the year there's maybe more ability to do that and double up classes. Is there an interdisciplinary learning project that you can get involved with that also involves working outdoors? There's opportunities around that as well. Is there any way we can get in there some skills for life and work? Maybe get as I say, get a parent or an employer or somebody in the local community along to work with you on a piece of work outside. If there's any ability for a bit of creative timetabling, that can be really helpful. But we're going to give some specific ideas over the next few slides of activities and things that you can do outside, and so you can see how it can fit in. On this slide, though, there's just some initial ideas as well about things that might be helpful to you. And we know that some of you might have done teaching outside a bit before, others might not. So forgive us if you feel this is a bit basic, but just some ideas. And if you've got any top tips or any thoughts, you can put them in the chat as well. So one of the things that can be useful for you as a teacher or in your department is to have an outdoor box. And it could be maybe a good idea to get some resources if there's maybe some parent council money floating around, or if it comes to the end of a financial year, we're just at the start of a new financial year, so we're not scrabbling around to finish paying our budgets, spending our budgets and things like that this time, but maybe parent council money might be available. So you could have an outdoor box which has things like cones or measuring tapes or chalk for writing on the ground, and we would recommend you use jumbo chalk rather than the normal chalk, because the normal chalk just tends to break. You might have a box of pencils, you might have some stopwatches. There's various things that you might have in your outdoor box, and if you've got any ideas of things that you think might be useful, just pop them in the chat. We've kind of put on this slide playground markings, and some schools have chosen to invest in permanent playground markings to help them. There's lots of examples, but if you don't have playground markings, but there are some sort of templates that you think would be useful, one option is a flat bed sheet where it's painted on the flat bed sheet, and then it can just be folded up and put away in your outdoor box. So that's an option if you don't have permanent playground markings, that you can use a plain bed sheet to have a grid or whatever it is that you're actually looking for. So some other equipment you might need, I think somebody mentioned for trig clinometers. If you rummage around in the department store cupboard, you might find a couple of them kicking about. You might find the odd trundle wheel, and they've probably lost their clicker as well, but you might find one that works. And so some measuring devices around there. And one other option is very cheap option to make is to have a rope snake. So you can either have a long rope that's knotted in every meter, or you can have a rope or a thick string that is chopped into meter slices, and those are good for sort of comparisons of measurements, estimate and measure and that kind of thing. And particularly 100 grid like the one that's shown on the screen, that's another option if you can get that in a painted painted on your playground, great. If not, having it on a bed sheet is an option. There's a wee resource that we've linked to on this slide, which is from Maths Week Scotland. I think was it last year or the year before? I think it might be the year before. can't remember, but the focus was outdoor learning. The last 2 years have just become a bit of a blur, haven't they, Nanette? Either last year or the year before, one of the themes for Maths Week Scotland was outdoor learning, and that link has got a whole host of games and activities that you can do outdoors. Now, obviously, some are primary, some are secondary, but there's a lot of stuff that is relevant for primary school. It's actually useful for younger learners in secondary as well. So some ideas there of activities that you can do as well. We talked a little bit about playground markings, and for secondary, here's some ideas about some playground markings that you could do. If you've got just an empty number line, there's lots of activities that you can. Thanks, Annette, 2020 for the Maths Week Scotland. For counting on, counting back, and various activities, and certainly thinking about positive and negative numbers, having an empty number line printed or painted on the ground so that learners can kind of be in the number line and they can go forwards and go backwards and actually physically move along it, can be helpful for them there. Empty grids, so 100 grids, can be useful for sort of. You can then put chalk onto them for certain numbers, and you could look at, it doesn't have to be counting in ones, it could be counting in tens. There's lots of different options there. We could have negative numbers in that as well. We could be looking at multiples and factors, those different kinds of activity games, again, where learners could be moving and standing on the number rather than it being on a pen and paper. Cartesian diagram, if you can get a 4-quadrant Cartesian diagram with maybe an X and Y axis marked on, then there's lots of potential there for learners to be in a position set by coordinates, and you can have families of points that would make straight lines or other functions as well. And so what's really nice, if by any chance you've got a big area of outdoor space which is overlooked by your maths department, being able to actually, I was very lucky that was in a sort of outdoor car park and concrete area out the back of my classroom in the last school I was at, and that's absolutely where I would have painted this in order to get pictures out the window of what's going on as well, because it would be good to see these patterns from on high as well. But again, you're not necessarily going to have space to do that, and if not, the bed sheet option is definitely there as an alternative as well. Some Venn diagrams, just looking at 2 and 3 sets and how they intersect. You might be able to use those for classifying objects. Carroll diagrams are also good for that two-way logic. Chessboard's fantastic. There's loads of activities around chessboards. If you could get one of them painted, not just to play chess or drafts, although that's great if you can get learners playing strategy games outside, brilliant. But some mathematical activities to do with chessboard is always an option as well. And then again, to have a set compass rows in your playground so that learners have an idea of, in relation to where they are, where's north, where's south, and just get a feel for the orientation of their environment. That's great as well. That's not an exhaustive list. There's other things as well that you can do, and it might be if you're in a campus where there's a primary as well, you might be able to sort of join up with them and think about what markings they could do to support learning in primary and secondary. Okay, so we're going to go on to some very specific ideas for learning outdoors, second level and above. And these slides that are here are available as a Word document so that you can actually edit them as well. You can download a copy and edit it and add your own ideas in. But what we've done is my colleague Jacqueline and I kind of sat and looked at all the experiences and outcomes and just chucked loads of ideas of things that we'd either done before or seen before or thought of, because we just had some space and time to think, if we were going to take as many different parts of the maths curriculum as we can outdoors, what would we do? And here's lots of ideas. So on shape, you've got the idea to look around for shapes and symmetries in the world around you, whether it's natural, whether it's man-made, thinking about, straight lines and angles. Where do they appear? Do they appear in nature, or is it really a man-made kind of structure? What's going on there? And just to think about that. We've got the opportunity to create big nets as well of 3D objects. So you know, indoors you're kind of limited by space. On a sheet of paper, could we be talking about big 3D, big nets of 3D objects and things. As somebody said earlier in the chat, for data analysis, there's loads of opportunities outdoors, loads of things you can collect information about, whether it's the natural habitat or the built environment that you're in. Thinking about ways you can collect, sort, organise and analyse data of your environment around you. So it's whether collecting the data outdoors, collecting it via pictures, via surveys, whatever it is that they're doing, and bringing it back, collating and analysing that data in some way, and maybe using technology to do that as well. There's lots of you know, mathematics, beauty and mathematics around in the world around us, and that's actually the theme for Maths Week Scotland this year. So Maths Week Scotland is just after the is end of September and beginning of October. It's that week that bridges September, October. Look out for some activity packs that are going to be available on the Maths Week Scotland site that's going to talk about maths and nature and design and art and just the beauty of maths, and so there'll be lots of activities around there for you as well. We can definitely do measuring time and estimating time and distance outside, and giving that opportunity to actually estimate and measure longer distances. We often do measuring distances, you know, with a ruler, and actually being able to think about how we might estimate and measure larger distances. It's good to give learners the opportunity to do that. I've also mentioned plotting points. If we could get a Cartesian diagram drawn outside, it'd be great to be able to plot points as well. Moving on to the next one, Ninette. So fractions, decimal fractions, and percentages. So we can. There's always, you know, for any part in numeracy and maths, we could be using chalk and on the ground to actually, you know, match things up and do our understanding. But by collecting natural materials, we might classify them, we might sort them, we might also think about quantifying what proportions they've come in. So it might be looking at different types of leaves and thinking what proportion of the leaves are this, what proportion of leaves are that. We could be thinking about sampling as well while we're doing that. But thinking about not just about how many do we have and that data collection side of things, it's that what proportion, what fraction, what percentage of them are these are of each different type. We can start to do that at second level and continue right through into third and fourth level as the you know, your learners progress in their mathematical sort of journey, I guess. Again, looking for angles out and about. And again, these are generally going to be in man-made settings. Where do we see different types of angles? Where, why are they the nature that they are? What purpose do they serve? And what can you see and why? Lots around right angles as well. Where do you see right angles and why are they important that those angles are right? You know, lots of verticals, lots of horizontals. What's the point of that? And again, with direction, angles around angles of turn. If everybody's outside, it's much easier to do that, thinking about turning a number of degrees than having folk in your classroom, particularly if your classroom's quite small. We talked a little bit about number lines and negative numbers, and we could certainly do that as well. Moving on, again, if we can then think maybe about going into third level. And again, if we're looking at analysing the world around us, we might think about ratios as well. So if we've talked about what fraction or percentage things are, we might also choose to talk about a ratio of one type to another type of things that we've collected. If we've got 100 square outside or a chess square outside, there's a chessboard outside, there's lots of activities there that we can be doing too. One of my favourite things to blow learners' minds is the idea of the legend of the rice on the chessboard, and it's an old Chinese sort of parable about knowing your stuff before you make decisions, and choosing either from a large quantity of rice that you can get, or you can get 1 grain of rice on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, 8 on the fourth, and so on, and thinking about how many grains of rice would be on the final square of the chessboard. And obviously it's an astronomical 2 to the power 64 number. So it might be worth exploring that, even if they collect pebbles or pine cones or leaves or whatever it happens to be. And if they just start that process, they'll soon see how exponential growth behaves and how mad it becomes in no time at all. Moving on to the next slide there. I'm not going to go through absolutely all of them, and you can have a wee look at them yourselves as well. Again, somebody mentioned speed, distance, and time. So here we can estimate and measure how long it takes to carry out a number of different actions, whether it's comparing walking, jogging, running, or hopping and skipping a fixed distance, and making an estimate about how long it will take, and then measuring it to check. Thinking about how accurate were our estimates, and thinking about how we can work out relative speeds from that. Again, in data analysis, could we think about how we might study the environment around us? There might be a piece of work that you could do in conjunction with the science department, looking at biodiversity, looking at, there might be an area of wildflowers that they can look at. If there is an ability to collect and measure data, and then think about what information can be extrapolated from that, from a context of the environment around us. So lots of things that you can do around this in conjunction with colleagues, and we really would recommend that you can have a conversation around that. So maybe they could collect the data during a maths lesson and then think about analysing it during a biology lesson, for example. Is there opportunity to do that? There's lots of nice opportunities to, sorry, just go back one there, just to create patterns using natural materials, and to be able to spot and describe patterns. And then the other thing that I was talking earlier about being able to work on a slightly bigger scale outside. We are very focused often when we're doing scale and scale drawings about taking large objects and scaling them down to be able to fit a scale plan or scale drawing on a piece of paper in a jot or on a piece of A4 paper, whatever it is that we're using. So much better can we actually just add the other bit on where we can scale something small up? So can we actually do a magnified version of something, and giving the space outside to be able to, you know, work with an unfamiliar scale and actually create something on mega size in the playground, and some of the logistics and teamwork challenges that might be around that, measuring, drawing, and managing to create it as accurately as they can. So just being able to work on a different scale outside can be of benefit. Moving on to the next one there, we're thinking about fourth level. And as we get into fourth level, probably the opportunities do start to cut down a little bit, because we do start to become a bit more abstract in what we're looking at. But by no means are there no alternatives. Again, if we've got a Cartesian grid there, we could start looking at coordinates in straight lines, coordinates in 4 quadrants, and start to think about families of points and how they join together to make linear functions, and start to explore the equations of straight lines at that point. We can explore more complicated patterns as well, think about finding, continuing the pattern and finding a formula for a pattern. Gradient's a nice one to explore outside. So there'll be probably likely to be a number of slopes around, particularly if it's ramp access to a building, or it might be that you're, you know, in your area of your school, you've got a path that's on a slope. Ramps are quite easy to measure the gradient. Sloping paths, less so. So a nice problem solving exercise there about how could they actually physically measure the gradient of a section of a path. A bit of problem solving there as well. There's lots of digital tools you can do to do that. For example, that you can, you know, some phones have the ability to look at measuring distances outdoors. iPads, you can measure distances as well. and also think about how you can maybe look at different altitudes if you're doing a different distance. Does anybody on their phone have the technology to say what height they're standing at that point? Or are they able to use something a bit more, use string and measurements like that? What can they do? You can also on phones get spirit levels, which is quite handy to see if you're actually measuring something that's horizontal and measuring something that's vertical. So there might be worth exploring different digital tools that you can use to measure slopes and to calculate gradients. I think sometimes gradient becomes one of these things that stops being meaningless. You say what's gradient and they go it's vertical over horizontal. Aye, but what is it? Tell me what it actually is and what it measures. And if they've actually done that and measured it physically, they're much more likely to remember the meaning and less be reliant on what this formula is that they use. And I think we've got one more slide here as well. No, we've got exhausted all the slides. So this is this slide here is just an example of some of the Maths Week Scotland activities that I mentioned earlier as well. So this is one of the earlier Maths Week Scotland packs, and there's a link on the site there, a link on the slide to the site there that you can follow for some further ideas. So maybe just pause just now to have a wee think. And is there any of the ideas? I know there's lots of ideas that on the slides that I didn't go through. Anything that you're teaching in the coming weeks that you think, do you know what? I could go and do that outside. Anything that you're thinking of what's coming up over the next 3 or 4 weeks with any of your classes at all, that you think you could take the plunge and go outside with them and see what it would bring to the party. Have a wee think and see if you can pop something in the chat about an idea that you could do over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Hopefully there's been something that's flashed, given you a little bit of inspiration.
I think you've wowed them with ideas, Iona, to be honest.
So they're just thinking, I actually do know what I'm teaching over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
It's been distance time with S2. Yeah.
I think that sometimes makes it real as well, that they're thinking about, it allows them to think about speed as a rate that's not necessarily miles per hour. It could be in meters per second. You could always, if you find a slug, you could always see how far it goes in a minute. You could get centimeters per minute or millimeters per minute of movement. Nice to be able to use different units of measurement there that you would normally use. Nice to get them to have an estimate of how quickly a slug moves. Okay. Definitely, just blown away.
I think, yeah, too many ideas, too much to think about. So maybe we'll come back again at the end and see if anybody's got any thoughts on either that, the outdoor learning, or the next bit. There's another suggestion: having my students create a map using trig to measure heights of landmarks. Could be linked to so many areas. That's a great idea. Yep.
Nice and really nice.
Nice idea.
Nice idea. Loads in there to think about, and how, a bit of flexibility there where they could do a bit of choice about what they want to include in it.
Staying in school rooms, quite limited space. Allotment.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's about being creative with your space. So some schools have loads of space and other schools have very little, and some have green space available, and some don't.
Sometimes there's arrangements with some of the local parks where they're happy, and they will actually provide some ranger support as well when they're there. So it's worth actually trying to find out what support there is in the local community that could allow you to go a wee bit further afield. It's not as spontaneous, but that might be something that's worth thinking about for the odd lesson. But I think it's, as Iona said, it's about trying to be as flexible as possible with the space that you have within your grounds. But obviously that will vary from school to school.
And thinking about, if you have got, if you are in a school which is in quite a closed-in urban environment, even just looking at that and thinking about how does this school fit in? How have they managed to use the space, utilise the space effectively? And you'll probably have some quite interesting shapes of places, areas, and just, you know, there'll be lots of angles and constructions around you, and thinking about why is that the way it is. There'll be lots to see in a way that's very different from, you know, if you have green space and you know, you might have grass playing fields that got trees around it in your grounds, or you might have playing fields that are somewhere else that you could use. There's different options, and I know if you're going outside of the school grounds, there's more logistics around that. Yep. But I think it's about thinking what activities are going to suit the outdoor space that you have that's easy to access, and not try and do everything, because you're not going to be able to do everything. It's about which types of activities suit your surroundings the best. Yeah, so if they are across the road, managing this without another pair of hands, I would just ask. I would say, you know, I want to go outside, but I feel I've got to cross the road. I need another pair of hands, even if it's just at the start and the end, to get them all across the road safely, and see if it, you know, it's something that you know, when I was in senior leadership, it's about supporting when folk are trying to do something creative. It's about thinking about how can I support them to do that, and having an extra body there to see them across the road and get them there and be on the other end of a walkie-talkie if there's any issues, and then go back and help them back at the end. You know, I think asking a colleague to help you out there is really worthwhile.
Yeah, and that might be that it's actually your link deputy that comes and does that, and it gives them an opportunity to see some of the learning that's going on and see some of your learners. Or it may be that it's a classroom assistant that can be used particularly in this time of year when the seniors are out in study leave. It may be that they could be directed to support. Just it is about flexibility, I think.
That's if they're not
doing
exams.
If they're not doing scribing. Yeah.
But happily, the exams, the big exams now at this point, and most of them are done and dusted, so there'll be smaller quantities of folk, and so hopefully there might be a few more staff kicking about able to kind of help with that. So there's no doubt you have to be more creative, but there are
space in the beach should provide some interesting opportunities. So yeah, something to look forward to. Is that Pam? Yeah, it is.
Good. Just our handy beach.
Yeah. Okay, I think will we move on again? So in the next part of the session this afternoon, we want to look at another way to think about taking mathematics out of the maths classroom. So this time we're not thinking about taking it outside as such, but we're thinking about you know, looking at how numeracy and aspects of mathematics permeate other curriculum areas within a secondary school. So all areas of the curriculum can provide a really engaging and motivating context for developing and applying numeracy skills. And the importance of numeracy across learning is highlighted in a number of key documents which have been published by Education Scotland over the years. This one in particular comes, the quote on the screen comes from the Thematic Review of Mathematics, which was published early 2020. I've kind of lost track now with the last few years, to be honest, but I think it was the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. The Multiplying Skills and Adding Value report. And that really emphasised the need to have a shared understanding of the importance of numeracy and how it contributes across the curriculum. So we think there's really three possible ways that it can be approached. But whichever way you choose, it's really important to emphasise that you'll require dialogue with colleagues, whichever way that you take it forward. Each approach will take time and planning, but it might be worth having a chat back in school to see what's already been done within your establishment, and what further joint working might be able to take place. For me, however, the place to start would certainly be to consider how areas of numeracy and mathematics can be enriched by incorporating contexts from other areas of the curriculum. So here's just a short checklist of things that we thought might be worth considering if you are involved in some whole school work around numeracy across learning. And as you can see, all of these really require you to engage with dialogue out with the department, and it's really important to try to make those links. There's a number of documents which are available, but before we actually start to look at these, I should also mention that myself and Iona and other colleagues within the MAS team have been looking at the Numeracy Across Learning Guidance document, which is available in the National Improvement Hub. And we're working on that at the moment to try to refresh it. It was published really a number of years ago now, and we've decided to revisit it. So we've been doing a bit of work on that, and it will be published hopefully by the beginning of next session at the latest, and it will give you some ideas for planning for numeracy across learning, and it will give you some reflective questions to consider. So that should be available on the National Improvement Hub by the August at the latest. But there are some documents there which are worth having a look at now. So there's loads of good examples to be found in this document. It makes links with social studies, E's and O's. And again, it's available in the National Improvement Hub. You can also just find it by using the link on the slide. Now, there won't always be a need, and as you'll have seen from in your career so far, there isn't always the time for you to play an active role in interdisciplinary learning within your classroom. However, as we've already said, it is important that through discussion with colleagues from different departments, that you help to lead and develop consistency in strategies and approaches to numeracy across learning. So you might find it worthwhile to analyse the resources that teachers in different subject areas are using as part of their planning, such as the document which I shared on the last slide, but also the science benchmarks which are linked to here. And now this document includes links to the numeracy E's and O's, and it will help give you and your learners an overview of where and when they'll learn new or apply existing numeracy skills across the science curriculum. So in the next few slides, I'm just going to give you some examples of links which can be made to other curricular areas within the BGE. So in this example, recipes can be converted into ratios to allow you to make more or less, depending on the servings required. In this one, we're looking at plan drawings, and these show a view from above looking down, and are often used for room plans, site plans, and maps. They can bring in compass directions, a key, and a scale. And when creating scale drawings, there can also be an emphasis on the accuracy of measuring, making use of appropriate estimation, and correct calculations. Being able to interpret statistics is a really common skill across lots of curricular areas. Data can be presented in several different ways from different sources, and it's important that learners can draw conclusions on the reliability, the validity, and the accuracy, as well as being able to interpret the numbers behind the statistics. So on the screen here, this is just a possible task in the context of religious and moral education, which emphasises those skills which in exploring data. This might link into other social subject areas and the science department and various different areas really across the curriculum. There's also many math skills which permeate through art and design, such as scale, perspective, ratio, geometry, proportion, symmetry, and tessellation. Or you might want to look at particular artists who are well known for linking maths into their designs, such as Klee, Mondrian, and Kladinsky. And finally, PE lessons can often be adapted to ensure that aspects of time and information handling are embedded. And again, this is just a possible suggestion for a task that might be undertaken. So moving on to the senior phase, there are often rich pickings to be found in SQA past papers. So this slide shows an N5 biology question, and in the next you'll see an N5 geography question. Lisa finds that our kids often struggle with unfamiliar contexts, but it can be quite difficult to source questions. Using a variety of questions from other curriculum areas can provide some examples. They can provide us with questions that require understanding, problem solving, and communication skills in contexts that will be familiar to some, but not to others. We can also use these questions as a starter for 10, and then we can ask similar questions at different levels. So recent discussions around reform in education have meant that it's worthwhile considering what the senior phase experience is actually about. Lots of you will be familiar or will be aware of the changes recently to the maths curriculum with the introduction of the new higher. But over the next months and possibly the next year or so, there will be more discussion around the future of the senior phase curriculum and the assessment of those courses. So we want to really start to think about the senior phase experience and how it serves the needs of our learners today, but also into tomorrow. So a key consideration for you at this point in your career might be how you might future-proof your curriculum, for example. So could we look beyond national qualifications to mathematics qualifications, such as national units? And there's a number that are available. Some of you might be aware of them, some of you might be involved in delivering them within your school or not. There are national units in craft and design and science, so it might be worthwhile thinking about how you could join up with other departments and establishments, such as local colleges, to deliver elements of national progression awards, such as the statistics within data science, or you might even become involved in delivering elements of foundation apprenticeships, such as civil engineering. And from that, you might bring in activities and short courses that better prepare your seniors for what comes next in their learning journey, such as free online qualifications or opportunities to lead STEM or engineering clubs within your establishment. So there's lots of things to really think about. And in the next few slides, I'm not going to talk through each of the individual units or courses, but there is just some examples taken from each of the types of questions and the types of content that is available. You'll have time, these slides will be provided on the Padlet after the end of this afternoon session, so you'll be able to go back to these and have a closer look, and you might want to then have a look on the SQA website to find out a little more about the opportunities that are out there. So this one is Mathematics for Science and Mathematics Craft 1. And I had a discussion with a PT just yesterday in a school in Stirling who have been delivering the Mathematics Craft 1 quite successfully. So it is out there in schools, possibly not in your own establishment, but again, just worth finding out a little bit more about. That's just another question from the craft one. And then a couple of the foundation apprenticeships, which these units feed into. And again, the Data Science National Progression Award, I mentioned it before. Again, there's a unit there which can be chosen from a suite of qualifications, and statistics plays a big part in that. Just before we move on to some links from the professional learning community, does anybody that's here tonight have experience of delivering any qualifications other than our standard mathematics or applications of maths? If you do, happy for you to either put it into the chat or come in and tell us about it. So it's Pam, Stats for Science, and Craft one. What we might do actually then is just move on and finish off this part of the presentation, and then invite you in just to maybe share a little bit with the group just at the end, if that's okay. Iona?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to come in and say I think the data science one is quite interesting. That it's a relatively new NPA, and there were two computing NPAs that came in about the same time as the cybersecurity one and the data science one, and it is worth having with the greater emphasis on using technology and statistics as well. It's worth having a conversation and seeing if their computing department is interested in running the data science, and it's another way of maths departments kind of offering broader pathways. But just the wider use of technology in numeracy and maths generally. Also maybe speaking with your business studies department or IT department about looking at how they use spreadsheets, what sort of support learners are given in spreadsheets through the broad general education, and thinking about how that mathematical crossover with technology can really be exploited. And that's certainly something that we're thinking with the new higher applications, that skills in using encoding and in using spreadsheets really important for higher apps. And sort of maybe thinking about how elements of that can be incorporated into our S1, 2, 3 maths courses really is what we're thinking about as well. So maths and technology is a real crossover. We were talking earlier about, there's a comment in the chat about looking at different types of graphs, whether that's through geography or sciences, and there's the whole learning for sustainability side of things as well. So there's lots of rich information out there for learners to apply their maths onto for understanding the information that they're seeing. So the possibilities are endless. Is just to be open to them and think about how you can extend what you do and offer more context for the numeracy maths. I'll stop talking.
Pam, I'm actually just going to ask you in just now because I see that you're saying that you need to head away in about 5 minutes. So, yep, if you've got something to chip in, that'd be great to hear from you.
Yep. Camera's working. Just camera off. Yeah.
That's you. Can see you.
I taught in the college sector for quite a long time. So the craft one, I covered it for about 4 weeks. I found quite a lot of it quite similar to National 5, quite a lot, but they should have known National 5. I guess my concern was let people electrical engineering course, it doesn't seem maths and electrical engineering, which is a bit worrying. So yeah, there's maybe a bit of a gap there sometimes in terms of learning expectations around engineering guidance, but that's for science. I covered last unit. That was really interesting. I really also I hadn't occurred schools could teach that in S6 really. So it might be if what schools saying they've got quite big higher next year about higher apps options. That unit might be quite a nice option. There's not a huge amount of overlap with higher. Quite a nice session. The name of it's maybe a little bit thing that I get from they got options than just science. So it'd certainly be, you know, I really. The other thing would just be in really practical in bigger schools.
You're breaking up a little bit there, Pam. We're missing bits of it.
In some of the maths for engineering modules,
Mhm.
might be a nice extension for that maybe doing advanced higher, or that are, you know, looking at engineering options at college. Maybe pupils who aren't going to do advanced higher but know they want to do engineering. That might be an option. Stats for business also has some quite interesting content that probably has. So there's a few options out there in the college qualifications.
I think we've lost you again, Pam.
Yeah.
I'll type it.
Okay. But thanks though for that contribution, and that's really interesting. And I think that crossover that you've got, that experience within the sort of further education is really useful. So, you know, it may be a useful discussion to have with further education colleagues if schools are working in partnership with them, just to look at how possibly in the future that offer can be widened out a little bit, and thinking about future-proofing our curriculum and how we can continue to move forward. So we just moving back to share with you a reminder of the professional learning community. Now I know we come back to this every time, but we can't emphasise enough what a rich source of information it is. And so in particular tonight we're just highlighting that on the homepage for the professional learning community, there's a tile for numeracy across learning. And if you click on the learning, teaching and assessment tile, you'll also see that there is a tile for outdoor learning. So once again, if I can recommend that to you, then it will take you to some of the links we've talked about this afternoon, and also many more. So finally, thanks Pam for putting that into the chat there. It comes to that time where we do have one more session to go, but we would like to share with you at this point the evaluation of the programme. We will send this out to all of those, everyone that's been to any of the sessions, and we really would welcome your feedback so that we can plan for how to take the programme forward next session. So the link's there for you, but at the moment I'm actually just going to now sort of open the floor for any questions, comments, thoughts, either around tonight's session or questions about previous sessions, or really just anything that you would like to share with us this afternoon. We will be happy to take questions.
Jeremy, I should say at this point, if you want to just finish the recording there, that's fine, so that folk can chat more openly. If you can let us know that you've done that.